Steph at the Golden One Center. The Golden State Warriors taking on the Kings tonight. We'll get to Bob and Reno coming up next after Kayte Christensen, TV analyst for the Sacramento Kings, doing a great job on NBC Sports California. We're proud of her. She shared something very private the other day on Instagram, and I have a lot of respect for Kayte. A lot of respect. She had to call a game. She called a game with her daughter on her lap, the second half of a game. And I have a lot of respect for her for that. Doing what she could do to parent. It was really sweet. Really, I almost teared up looking at that Instagram post. So let's get Kayte Christensen on here. We got a big game up in Sacramento. Kayte, good morning. Welcome to the Morning Rose. Good to talk to you on the radio airways and not in the makeup room or something.
I know. Good morning. How are you guys?
We're good. We're getting ready for this game tonight, of course. And first of all, the injury report for the Kings. Now, everybody's questionable. We read the list: De'Aaron Fox, Davion Mitchell, Malik Monk, Domantas Sabonis. The whole team's on an injury report. Are they waiting to see what's up with Memphis in Milwaukee? Now, if Memphis is leading Milwaukee, say by 10 or something, will Mike Brown then decide to say, you know what, we're not going to play our guys? What's going on with this long injury report up in Sacramento?
Yeah, obviously this is a team that has really not had any injury issues all season. When you look at it in the scope of the rest of the NBA, they've been really healthy. Now, this is the end of the season, and there are a ton of nicks and bruises and this and that. Domantas Sabonis has been playing with a broken thumb since December. So there's definitely a lot of lingering things for a lot of players, but I've been kind of in the dark with this too. I know that the players, the team really wants to get to 50 wins. But as you guys know, with 2 games left and you're pretty set in where you're going to be, it's kind of a risk, right? And so there is a possibility from what I'm hearing based on what's going on with Memphis, that potentially they could go. I think it's just a wait-and-see situation. It's not like there's a history with, obviously, Mike Brown. This is his first year here to kind of see how this is going to be handled. And then, Harrison Barnes is not on that list, correct?
I didn't see him on that list. He was the one guy not on that list. I know Matthew Dellavedova is out, but HB's on that list. Maybe it's an HB revenge game. I don't know.
Yeah, well, HB has played every single game this year, and he's such a professional. He takes it so seriously, the work that he puts in to stay healthy. And he was asked after the game, Mike Brown was asked after the game in Dallas, if Harrison was going to be rested for this upcoming game. And he goes, I'll talk to Harrison. We'll see what's going on. And when we finished the press conference, I said to Mike Brown, good luck. And we all just kind of laughed because that's, kind of the situation with HB. Nobody on this team is really a sit-out kind of guy. Domantas Sabonis is not one for rest. He doesn't agree with it. So it's a toss-up in the air to see what happens tonight.
I always love when I hear people say, it don't matter who we play. We'll play anybody. Come on. You've been in the locker room. You've played. We have preferences. There's grudge matches. There's rivals. Right. You think there's a path of least resistance, or sometimes you just want to kick the crap out of somebody for whatever reason. Who do you want the Kings to play?
In the postseason? My goodness.
First round.
Well, in the first round. It's interesting because you got to look at it from a matchup perspective and an experience perspective. And when you look at the Western Conference, you're like, man, there really is no easy or good matchup, right? Mm-hmm. I think that when you look at teams like the Clippers, it's a very different type of offense than the Warriors, for example. It's very kind of ISO-oriented. You've got Kawhi and PG. I don't know what his health status is going to be for the postseason, but we have matched up well with the Clippers all season long. And then teams like, Golden State, who are very, very much offensively oriented in terms of lots of movement, lots of threats, all of those things. It's a more difficult matchup for everybody. But then you look at, the cross the bay thing, the Northern California rivalry, whatever people want to call it. And then kind of, comments that were said at the beginning of the season. There was that podcast that Draymond Green was on, and he kind of mentioned hey, I can't get up to play teams like the Kings, basically. And I remember talking to Harrison Barnes specifically about that in training camp, and he's like, oh, yeah, we've talked about it. And the team has talked about it. So, internally in that locker room, those types of comments don't go away. Those are put on a bulletin board. Those are the things that I remembered. And, yeah, you do get up for games like that in a different way.
Kayte Christensen here on the Morning Rush on 95.7 The Game with Joe Shasky, the Butcher, and Bonte Hill. Does a great job with the Sacramento Kings as a color analyst with Mark Jones on NBC Sports California, sometimes with Kyle Draper, our main man. Kyle Draper, he's a funny dude. And you've been around Sacramento for a long, long time. So what has this season meant for you? Because there's been some dark days up there in the 916.
Yeah, my first season with the Kings was the first year they missed the playoffs. So I've kind of been here for most of all of that. I left for a few years and came back in 2013. And from the standpoint of like the players, like obviously it's different because unfortunately this playoff drought has been put on the backs of the players that have come throughout it. And obviously none of these guys are responsible for a 16-year drought. But there's Harrison Barnes, there's De'Aaron Fox, Rashawn Holmes. Those are three guys that have been here the longest, and so they understand from a team perspective what that's like from a player perspective. But for me personally, you become so embedded in this community in Sacramento. It's such a wonderful fan base. It's a smaller market. It's the only show in town, and these fans, this city, they really love their team. They've supported them through a lot over the last 16 years. So for me personally, I'm just so thrilled for the city, for the fan base, because they really deserve to kind of have some joy, right, when it comes to this Kings team. So it has been a wild ride this year. No one expected this team to be here. If they said that they expected it, they're not being honest. I think everyone was like, hopefully a play-in, setting those goals to try and get to the playoffs, that type of thing, to have the opportunity to be in the hunt. No one expected them to be third place in the Western Conference and, have home court advantage in the first round. So it's been a really thrilling, exciting ride for me personally, just being able to call to action and get to know this coaching staff and this team. It's just a really incredible group of human beings.
Yeah, Mike Brown's our guy. Me and Bonte have had multiple conversations with him over the years, and my favorite is that he's so real that they don't even want him, at least the Warriors, didn't really want him talking to us too much because he might be a little too real. He's had such a great impact. Like, there's literally not one fan, one person associated with the Warriors that would have anything negative to say about him. I think we're all rooting for him, but if we play them, all that goes out the window.
Yeah,
but
fair,
but
right?
What does Mike Brown mean to the organization and to the fans? Because I really do. I love that guy.
He's so personable, right? And just his press conferences, the things that he says are so real. And I think that that's something that a lot of fans truly appreciate. We've all seen the coaches that will, come out on the podium and they'll give their post, game press conference after a disappointing loss. And, hey, I got to look at the film. We'll get back to it. We're going to get back to the drawing board. Mike Brown comes out and he is very honest and real. He'll call out his players while also embracing the players. And I think that that's a really unique gift to Mike Brown. And if you talk to coaches throughout the league, players throughout the league that have coached or played under him, they definitely talk about the relationships that he builds with players. And because he builds such great relationships and that trust, he is able to be very honest and pull players out while also lifting them up. Very similar to kind of, Monty in Phoenix, who does the same thing. He's I'm not calling you out, I'm lifting you up type thing. And so Mike is just an extraordinary human being and has really, really got this locker room and embraced them, and they feel the love and they also feel the drive, the push that he also presents.
Kayte, before we wrap this up, if we do get a Warriors-Kings first-round playoff series, it'll be the first time since both of these teams been in Northern California that they've met in the playoffs. Heck, they haven't been in the same postseason at all since both teams have been in Northern California when the Kings moved over from Kansas City. The Kings, quietly, you talked about the bulletin board material. I'm looking at the Kings, and I've watched them from afar all season long, averaging over 121 points a game. They quietly match up well with the Golden State Warriors. Do they feel like that in that locker room as well?
I think so for sure, because one of the things that the Kings struggle with is playing teams that have incredible size and length, right? And the Warriors do not kind of fall into that category. Right. When you look at the construction of both rosters, it's very similar. Lots of shooters, skilled guys, that type of thing. And so, I think that when you look at it across the board, yeah, it is a favorable matchup in terms of just size matching up that way. But again, matchups are about kind of style of play and skill. And you've got to look at the fact that, Mike Brown is very familiar with the system, the players. So that's a favorable thing as well. Just the internal knowledge that they have of how they would attack that 7-game series. And what's exciting to me about this is I think if memory serves, we played the Warriors 3 times very early in the season. And then we got them the last home game of the season. So there's been a lot of time that has passed. There's been changes. People are healthy now, that type of thing. But there's a difference in kind of the body of knowledge, right?
Yep.
So I was curious going into this game. Selfishly, I was like, listen, it's been a while since they've played the Kings. It's different when you're game planning for a 7-game series potentially when you just saw them, right? And you saw all their weapons out there on the floor. So it's different when you play a 7-game series and you can go and immediately return to the drawing board and make adjustments, make changes, and that's where coaches really make their money. In my opinion, is the game planning in the postseason with a one-day turnaround. And so it's going to be exciting. It's going to be exciting. And to me, you guys, listen, if the Lakers end up making the playoffs, which I fully expect them to do, this is going to be the first time in NBA history where all 4 California teams are in the postseason. That's wild.
That is wild. Tim Royce, he brought that up the other day on this show, and I couldn't believe it because the Clippers, people forget the Clippers were bad for so long. So that would be crazy that all 4 California teams would be in the playoffs. But the Kings are the Pacific Division champions. And Kayte, you've done a great job. I loved you sharing your story the other day, having your daughter in your lap, calling a basketball game alongside Mark Jones, and you didn't flinch. That was awesome, Kayte. That really was.
Oh, thank you, guys. I appreciate that. That was a very stressful, anxiety-ridden second half that also went into overtime. I was really grateful for that. But you know what? That's the moment I'm going to remember for the rest of my life.
And you maintained your professionalism, and you called a game like a pro. You're doing a great job up there in Sacramento. Have a good call tonight up there in the 916, Kayte. Thanks for the time.
Thank you.
All right, guys.
Anytime. Kayte Christensen does a great job with the Sacramento Kings.